You were the #1 rock star in the world. And it started with your first hit, 18.
Yeah.
You were in multiple bands. You started out in a band called the Earwigs.
Right.
But that hit changed everything. So you're in a car, I think maybe with some of your bandmates, and you hear your song 18 on the radio for the first time. What was that like?
We were the band that wasn't supposed to ever have a hit.
Yeah.
We were the notorious Alice Cooper band. We were the outlaws.
Yeah.
Every parent hated us.
And that was good for business, wasn't it?
We didn't necessarily do it that way. We just ended up being that.
Yeah.
And we did a song called I'm 18. I'm 18 and I like it, right?
Yeah.
That was almost a punk anthem.
Yeah.
Having no idea that was going to be a hit single. And we're driving along, and all of a sudden we hear, pick hit this week on CKLW, and 18 comes on. Believe me, we stopped the car. We had never heard any of our records ever on the radio before. Yeah. And we're sitting there listening to it, and we're all looking at each other, just laughing, going, what a mistake they just made, you know. Then I heard it 2 hours later, and then you hear it again 2 hours later.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's not just a big hit, it's on the charts.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there between the Rolling Stones and Simon and Garfunkel, and there's your song.
Wow.
And to the business part of rock and roll, that gets the attention of the money guys.
Yeah.
The worst thing you could do to a band like Alice Cooper, as notorious we were, is give us a hit.
Right.
Because now you had to deal with us.
Yeah.
And everybody gets one for once in a while. I get a lucky home run once in a while. Second one came out, was a bigger hit. Third one came out, was a bigger hit. So all of a sudden now, we didn't chase the charts. We didn't say we got to write a song that's going to be on the charts.
Right.
We got that song on, and now the charts was looking at us.
Yeah.
And we were in that golden age where Bob Ezrin, our producer, knew how to take our songs and make them into hits.
When you realized you needed Jesus, and you were raised as a Christian.
Oh, I was the
in a
prodigal
Christian
son.
home.
I mean, I grew up, all my friends were Christian kids.
Right.
I was in church Friday night, Wednesday night,
Yes.
Sunday, all day Sunday.
Yeah.
And we grew up together playing baseball and doing everything you could possibly do. And then when the band accidentally took off, 1 in a million chance that your band's going to make it.
That's right, a lot don't.
And we went to LA. We were at that golden time when we came along with something that everybody wanted.
Yeah.
We were not peace and love. We were the other side.
Yeah.
We were the darker side. But there was a sense of humor to it.
Yes.
You know, and people started getting the sense of humor that this dark vaudeville was pretty funny. You know, it had both things in it.
Yeah.
I went as far away as you could get.
Yeah.
I became the poster boy for what was wrong. The 700 Club was burning my albums. Said, this is the worst person you could ever possibly.
Did you like it at the time when that happened?
We were laughing. You know, I almost wanted to go on the show on the 700 Club and go, okay, what book do you want to talk about in the Bible? Because I grew up in the Bible.
You could have given them a run for their money.
So, but I went as far away as I could. Became an alcoholic. Didn't realize I was going to become an alcoholic. You were just drinking beer with the boys. Every day. Different was that they could stop, I couldn't. And that beer was constant now. And it was not alcohol, it was medicine now.
Almost like a prop, too.
Yeah, and it was a prop, but I mean, it was a good prop. I was never drunk, I was never angry, I was never mean. I was always that Dean Martin kind of cool. Until it started throwing up blood.
When you were a young man, you had a very serious surgery. You still have a scar.
Yeah.
And your parents and you, of course, as well, all believe that was a miracle.
Yeah.
But then fast forward later in your life, you're at the peak of your success. You're an iconic figure, and you got heavily into drugs. And you're in a room, and you've got a rock of cocaine, like the size of a softball.
Yeah.
I recall you saying something along those lines. And you're using it. Your wife effectively has left you. She's moved to Chicago. She says, I'm done with this. And you look in the mirror, and what do you see?
I had been awake for about 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And I was up on the top of Beverly Hills in my big mansion.
Yeah.
I had a pipe, a rock, and a pistol.
Whoa.
And all my wife's dresses hanging up around the room so nobody could look in because you're paranoid as all get about police coming. You've got your cocaine. And I'm sitting there going, this is it? I've alienated everybody. I've got my cocaine now, though, and I've got my gun. And I go in the other bathroom, and I look in the mirror. Now, to this day, I don't know if I had the Alice makeup on.
Yeah.
But I looked in the mirror, and the lines that come down from the makeup were blood.
Yeah.
And I was probably hallucinating.
Yeah.
But I flushed the rock down the toilet. Finally called up Cheryl and I said, I'm okay now, I'm back. And she goes, not that easy.
Yeah.
We finally got to a point of her saying, Christian counseling,
Yeah.
and this and that, you set it up. I want to know how serious you are about this. I set it up with Lehman down in Tucson, and we started going Christian, and it took 5 years before she realized that I was not going to fall back.
Wow.
Into doing cocaine and all that. But I understood that. I could totally understand why she would be, she loved me, but she was suspicious. And any drug addict will tell you that drug becomes like oxygen. If you don't have it, you'll sell everything in your house to get it. I mean, it's an addiction beyond addiction. And once it's gone, you don't miss it at all.
Yeah.
I mean, once it was gone, I had never even, it was just gone, Yeah. But I mean, when you're addicted, you are attached at the hip, and honestly, nothing else is important.
When you were younger, you're just getting started in your career. You met Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
He was going to record you. He says, do you have an agent? He said, we don't have one yet. So you met Shep Gordon, and you walked into a room, and 3 iconic rock stars were in that room. Who were they?
It was Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin.
Almost like the Mount Rushmore of
exactly.
rock.
All dead at 27, by the way.
Yeah, so they're in the so-called 27 Club.
Right.
And, now, and since then, of course, Amy Winehouse has joined that so-called club.
There's
Brian
about
Jones,
20 of them.
Yeah, there are. Brian Jones from the Stones and Kurt Cobain, all tragically dead at the age of 27. But you walk into this room of these iconic rock figures, and they were so talented. I remember you told me each one kind of was an innovator in music, weren't they? I mean,
they were the 3 most influential people in rock.
Yeah.
I mean, other than the Beatles and the Stones.
Yes.
They were the 3 that were everybody knew who they were.
That's right.
And Jimmy did something nobody had ever done, Jim Morrison did something nobody had done, and Janis Joplin did.
Very true.
So there they were, the most creative people in the building. Nobody knew at that point they were going to be dead at 27. And maybe it was that whole James Dean, live fast, die young, and have a good-looking corpse.
Right.
But that was kind of the attitude.
Right.
Nobody wanted to get to 30.
Yeah.
When I hit 30, I went, I'm washed up.
Yeah.
Nobody ever thought past 30.
No.
Because you went, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when I'm 30?
Yeah. My perspective as a fan, I'm a few years younger than you, not that many, but, I grew up listening to all this music, admired all these people. So in a short period of time, around 1970, the Beatles break up. All these rock icons die. I was using drugs at that time. I was smoking a lot of weed, using LSD. And in my mind, to me, it was like, this era is over. This is all empty. And that sent me on a search.
Yeah.
Kind of a process of elimination.
Sure.
What is the meaning of life? Was a 17-year-old kid. I said, well, it's not in drugs, sex, and rock and roll. Been there, done that in my own little version of it. It's not in the affluent world that my mother lived in, and she was friends with John Wayne, and she had a friend who was close to Frank Sinatra's wife, so she knew Frank. So it's not in that world, that affluent swinging world. Where is it? And then I came across a group of very outspoken Christians on my high school campus, sitting around in a circle singing songs about God. I thought they were delusional, but for the first time in my life, I thought, what if they're right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Hollywood Vampires. So
it was
Barry
a drinking
Nelson,
club.
Keith Moon,
Harry Nilsson,
Mickey
John
Dolenz,
Lennon, Mickey Dolenz, Bernie Taupin, and anybody else that would come into town.
John Lennon occasionally?
Yeah, he would come in, and we would sit there and we would drink every night at the Rainbow, last man standing kind of thing. And when that kind of broke up, because everybody went back out on tour, half of them were dead. And still, we went right on because I was in control of this drinking. At least I thought I was, until I realized I really wasn't in control. It was now medicine. And I didn't even like the taste of it anymore, but I had to have it. I woke up one morning, threw up blood, and Cheryl goes, "Party's over." And I was in an institute, to stop. And you know what? After 2 days, I felt great. But I kept going, when I get out of here, I'm going to go back to my thing, and it's going to be everywhere. I came out of there, never once had a fallback, never fell back on alcohol, never fell back on drugs. 39 years, 38 years. So God literally took it away from me.
So you don't describe it as you were cured, you say you were healed.
Yeah, people would say, well, you're a cured alcoholic. And I go, no, I was a healed alcoholic.
What's the difference?
Well, God took it away from me. Even the doctor said, it's impossible that you don't at least fall off the wagon 3 or 4 times because you're the classic alcoholic. And I said, what you don't understand is that God took it away from me.
Yeah.
I said, it's a miracle. After a while, they went, you know what? God took it away from you. Because they said, everything about your life should be deception. That's what an alcoholic and a drug addict does. They put on this air that they're cured, but back here they're doing this and they're doing that. That never happened. And so even the doctors were going, miracle. You're a 1 in a million case. And I went, well, God works like that.
I think people are really surprised to hear that a lot of people don't know that you believe in Jesus Christ. It still comes as a surprise to people. And yet, not only do you believe, but you have a strong faith in him. You've established a center for young people called Solid Rock, where you're trying to really help turn people, get their lives turned around, turn them toward God. You don't hide this in any way. So who is Jesus Christ to you?
He's the core of everything. He's life itself. He's the light. If we don't all revolve around Christ, and we're way out in space somewhere. Mm-hmm. He draws you in. He's the light. You're drawn to that light. And it's nothing you can explain in words. It's something that happens to your heart where all of a sudden you realize who this is. And you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy of this. Talk about I'm not worthy.
Yeah, I'm not worthy.
We are not worthy.
Yes.
And yet, still, being hung on the cross, he knew your name. He knew my name. And that made me go, how can I not believe in this? He changes your heart. No, he didn't say, and now that you're a Christian, you can no longer be in rock and roll. His plan was, now you're a Christian, go be in a rock and roll band, but follow me. Be Alice Cooper. And that's what Christians don't understand. I can be Alice Cooper, and I can't tell you how many emails I get saying, that song you wrote, Hey Stupid? Yeah, changed my life. I was gonna kill myself. That song spoke to me. Some of the songs that don't make any sense at all, they go, I turned to Christ because of that song. And I go, that song? What? It spoke to them differently. It said something differently. So now, when I write, I always try to have some lyric pointing towards Christ. At one point, we did an album called Brutal Planet and Dragon Town. And what it was talking about was, it was a heavy metal album. This is so cool, man. It's really... And then Christian kids started listening to it and going, this is a Christian album. It's talking about how this is a brutal planet. And Dragon Town is the result of it. If you get one shot, you don't get another chance. If you end up in Dragon Town, there's no way out. But Brutal Planet's pointing out all the things that point to Christ. The horrible things, but the things also that point to Christ. That album and The Last Temptation, which was another album, about that. It was written sort of like Something Wicked This Way Comes. The circus comes to town, the kid goes to the circus, and they try everything to get him to join the circus, right? And at the end, he doesn't, right? They were being sold in Christian bookstores, and my record company couldn't figure out why. They're going, why are we selling records in Christian bookstores? Because it was Christian albums. You know, 2 or 3 of my songs were used like in choirs, you know, that a song like I Am Made of You, Salvation. There's on these stories, you know, a murder mystery, but there's a song called Salvation, how the murderer is going, is there any chance for salvation? I guess, well, that's the song that, so you did all these horrible things, but yeah, there is a chance for salvation.
It's an amazing thing that, you know, people chase after these things. Young people today, you know, a poll was taken among them, and they said, what do you want more than anything else? And they said, to be rich and famous. And Andy Warhol, who you knew, once made his statement, it's attributed to him at least, one day everyone will be famous for 15 minutes,
Right.
something along those lines.
Like that.
And today, that literally is true for some people.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're famous online because you posted this video that went viral. You become a so-called influencer. And this is their whole goal in life, chasing after fame. But look, you've been there, you've done that, you've bought the t-shirt. In fact, you've been the t-shirt. And you're saying that what you're really looking for is God. Am I hearing you right?
If that's not your final goal, and that should be the most important goal,
Right.
everything else is secondary. Everything else is thirdary. Everything, you know, I always said this before, and a lot of people don't like the statement, but if I were going to put what's important to me in order, Alice Cooper would be about 5th.
Yeah.
Once you've answered that knock,
Yeah.
and once you've committed to that, and once you start realizing how merciful that we've been treated,
Yes.
and you know, and how much grace we've been given.
You said there's like Alice Cooper on your list is like 4th down on the list. What's number 1, 2, 3?
Well, I think your relationship with Christ is the number one thing. And of course, your family. My family are all Christian. You know, my wife is just, I mean, she's like walking in a Bible herself. And yet she plays Mademoiselle Guillotine on stage, and she plays all these characters. The kids are all in show business, but they're all Christians. You know, so when people say to you, they say, who are you? I go, well, first, I'm a child of God. Second of all, I'm in a rock band. You know, it's not, I'm Alice Cooper, the rock singer, and I'm a Christian. The priority is that I'm a child of God. Oh, and then I'm a rock singer, and I do this, and I'm a father, and I'm a husband. You know, so in that order, I think, is really who you are.
Do you think when you're young and you're hungry, like you're a young rock star, you're in your band, The Spiders, then you become Alice Cooper, you're climbing your way up, and then when you get there, then you go to the stage 2 and stage 3, and in your case, you become iconic. You're still iconic. You walk into a room, you told me you walked through an airport, people say, we're not worthy because it was in Wayne's World, and they think they're the first people that did it,
Right.
when in fact, it happens to you all the time.
Right.
But, you know, when you get to whatever stage that is, do you think that for some of these people who start abusing drugs or even take their own life, is it because they get to the top and they realize there's nothing there? Maybe when they thought it would be there, it keeps them going, but when they get there and they don't find it, is that why they check out? What do you think happens in the mind of a person?
I think if you don't have the Lord in your life,
Yeah.
you're always going to be trying to fill that hole
Yeah.
with something.
Yes.
It's either going to be drugs, or it's going to be Ferraris,
Yeah.
or it's going to be houses, or wives, or this, or that,
Right.
or fame.
Yeah.
And you're never going to achieve it.
Yeah.
Because there's that inner thing of us that when we're born,
Yeah.
of reconnecting with God,
Yeah.
that's there. And even if you're denying it, that's what you're searching for. And so they'll go to, the new fad is this. I'm going to
Yeah.
go be now a Buddhist.
Yeah.
I'm now going to be a vegetarian goat yoga person.
Yes.
I'm going to be this. And they go through everything
Yeah.
and still don't find it. And the last place they look is the Lord.
That's right. Why do you
Because-
think it is?
Well, I think because once you say God, you're my God, you're my Savior. Now you have to answer to him.
Yes.
People do not want to give up their God self.
Yeah.
The self that they control. I control my life.
Right.
Even people go to church. I go to church. Okay, yeah, but you haven't given yourself.
Yeah.
You haven't given yourself fully. And that's where the fulfillment comes from. You can't explain that to somebody that's not searching. If you put anybody and say, here's the biggest mansion on the planet, you can have anything you want. You can have drugs, you can have alcohol, you can have women, food, but you can't leave the mansion.
Yeah.
You'll find a way to kill yourself.
It's a prison.
At a point, you'll either eat yourself to death, you'll drug yourself to death, you'll do something because it's not natural to be in prison.
Yeah.
That's everybody that was in that position ended up dying, way before their time. I became an alcoholic and a drug addict for a good reason. I didn't know it was a good reason, but I didn't know God was going to use it.
Yeah.
I can now go into a place and talk to kids about drugs and alcohol, and they can't say, well, what do you know about it?
Yeah, you've been there.
I did everything, okay? I've been there. I almost died from everything that I did. I can speak from experience now. I think God used my alcoholism and my drug addiction and said, yeah, you're gonna go through this, but it's gonna be something I can use later.
Yeah.
And I sit here and I go, I have no idea why he let me live.
Yes.
Except for this fact that I can talk about it now and I can give him all the credit.
Yeah. Our setback can turn into a setup, and God can use it, and you speak from experience. I mean, the Apostle Paul was a brilliant orator and communicator, but in almost every time he spoke, he just told a story.
Yeah.
Like, this is who I used to be.
Yeah.
I hunted down Christians. I killed them. And Jesus came to me on the Damascus Road, and he tells a story. And, there's power in a story. And you have one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. So maybe there's a young person right now watching, and they're almost where you were, or maybe they are where you were when you were in that room and you had the dresses up, blocking out the windows, and you're at the end. You've got a rock of cocaine, you've got a gun. And what would you say to that person right there? Here's what you need to do.
For one thing, I don't know one drug addict that ever said, what a great idea. It sounded like a great idea, and you do get that momentary buzz and you feel like euphoric.
Yeah.
And you feel wonderful for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
That euphoria turns normalcy. You're in this euphoria.
Mm-hmm.
Here's normal. You go up to the euphoria, and then you come back down to normal. Pretty soon, you're living in euphoria. Normal is depression. Depression is black depression. That's where suicide comes from. So, I don't know one alcoholic or one in rock and roll or in movies or anybody you've ever heard of that said, good idea. It's the most unfulfilling thing there is. And yet, Satan uses it pretty well because it's a thrill. What do you got? What do you got to lose? Here's a thrill. I would say to him, and kids are smarter now than they used to be. Unfortunately, their world is more dangerous now. When we were kids, if you got in a fight, you got a black eye, bloody nose, and next day, a little respect. Now, somebody might drive by your house with a machine gun. When we were kids, if you got in trouble with a girl, you got a penicillin shot. Now you die. The ante's up on everything. So these kids have got to be smarter. And I think kids can look at our drug problems and go, I don't really want to get involved in that. My thing I would say to them is, when you hear that knocking at the door, answer the door. If the Lord is knocking at your door, answer it. It's the best thing that you could ever do. And you can avoid all this insanity,
I think Jesus summed it up perfectly when he said, the thief, speaking of Satan, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Yeah. But I have come that you might have life, and that more abundantly. The Lord says in Scripture, behold, I set before you life and death, blessings or curses. Choose whom you will serve. So it's a choice. But then I love how that verse goes on to say, choose life. So it's almost like the Lord saying, okay, here's a test. here's the correct answer on the test. Make this choice. But it's up to us, isn't it? He's not going to force us to believe. You didn't have to turn back to the Lord. You could have continued on that course, and quite frankly, you could have been another tragic rock and roll story.
I was as close as anybody ever came.
Yeah.
When I went into the hospital, doctor said, we'll give you a month before you're joining your buddies.
Wow.
Because, I mean, you just can't treat your body like that. And on top of it, I'm touring. So it's a constant flow, constant energy, constant this, constant party. And that sounds like fun, a constant party. Got to a point where I would go backstage and look at my stage costume and start crying, because I knew what I had to do to get into that costume to perform was now depression. It wasn't fun like it used to be. And it wasn't because of the Alice character. Alice was not the villain. Alice wasn't the problem. I was the problem. Alice was kind of the relief, because Alice didn't drink on stage. Alice didn't do drugs on stage. I was the one that, Dr. Jekyll was the problem, not Mr. Hyde. And really, the only cure I had was Jesus. And the fact that I can still go out and play the character, and I can still go out and do the shows, and have fun doing it, and know that I'm still helping people out in a way. People that you can look at it and say, wow, I get letters like this. If you can stop drinking, well, I can. So God made me that exception, where he said, you are going to be known for this, and then you're not going to do it anymore. People will look at that and go, wow, there's hope. I can come out of this. But there comes that point in your life where, when you're lying in bed somewhere in Wichita on a tour bus, where you go, what is this about? Is this really it? Is this all there is? There's that song, Is That All There Is? Because it can't be. There must be something better than this. And I think that's when you start hearing the Lord knocking. Because, there's nobody on this planet that he hasn't knocked on the door. Again, you said we have a choice. Do we keep pursuing what's in the world? Seek me and everything will be added to you.
That's right.
When I started proclaiming Christ, everybody thought, well, that's the end of Alice Cooper. We have never done better. On every level, since I have proclaimed Christ. It should have gone the other way. It should have absolutely ruined my career.
Well, especially because of a persona and a trajectory that people may perceive that you're on.
Yeah.
But in reality, they don't realize it's a performance. You take on the role of a character.
Sure.
But you've redeemed it and turned it around
Exactly.
to use as a tool for good.
I think that's how it's been used. My show has always been a good against evil. Alice plays the villain. And what happens to him? He gets his head cut off. Because the bad guy's always got to get his head cut off. And then what happens? He comes back. White top hat and tail, balloons, and he's redeemed. And just that simplicity of that will connect to people. Go, oh, he can be redeemed. He's not, they can't kill him. Well, you can kill his body, but you're not going to kill his spirit. And that's always been the ongoing theme of Alice Cooper, has been redemption at the end.
And it is redemption, and we're so thankful for how you speak up for your faith. Alice, could you define what redemption is to you?
Well, none of us deserve redemption, but Christ on the cross, if that blood is the most precious thing, that is your redemption. He was the perfect sacrifice. There's no sacrifice we could make that would be better than the Son of God dying for you.
That's right.
Understanding your sin, understanding that you're going to sin after that, and yet still paying the price. You can't do it. You can't ever repay that. And once you realize that, then you are connected to the Lord. He has taken a residence in your life. And now he's with you at every moment. So redemption is giving into that and saying, Lord, you're right, here I am.
Exactly. When Jesus died on the cross, he said, it is finished. It was a complete payment. It wasn't like, here's a down payment, we'll work out the rest later. A complete payment. And the word finished is interesting. It comes from a single word, tetelestai, which means it's completed, it's accomplished, it's done.
Yes.
You know, like the old song says, Jesus paid it all.
Yeah.
All to him I owe.
Yeah, that's true. There's no way of repaying God back except for acceptance. And again, we go and we live this life and we're in an everyday situation where everything comes at us in a million ways. How do you deal with it? Well, you lean on Christ.
You know, I was born in Houston. I was Southern Baptist. You know, growing up, you know, we went to the First Baptist Church downtown Houston, and then switched over to Bel Air, Texas. But you know, it's that in the 50s and 60s, it was such a great time to be a kid in this country. And I was baptized when I was 9, and in my teen years, I became disillusioned with what I call churchianity, I guess. Wow. You know, and it was also late 60s, early 70s. There was a lot of other things that were, you know, pulling at this country. And I got into, I read a book called Siddhartha. I got into reading about other religions, Hinduism. I went around the world. I read the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada. I'd read the Bible, you know, cover to cover, and read the Quran. And you know, there was a drug culture at the time. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, it was the drug culture that was going on there. It was about to expand your mind. You know,
Did you inhale?
It was like a spiritual experience.
Did you inhale?
Did I? Yes, I did inhale.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I'll say it right now. But you know, I wound up. You know, things are. You know, it's all about really filling that hole, that empty hole.
Sure.
Inside you, and I identified always as a Christian, I think, but I didn't really know what that was, and I, you know, finally to the point where after everything was going great for me in the world, but finally getting to that point, after I did Great Balls of Fire, where I played Jerry Lee Lewis. Yeah. God bless his soul, rest his soul. Yeah, I was in rehab about 6 months after. Well, I'd been his fifth go around, but I wound up in rehab about 6 months after I finished the movie. And when you got out, you still have that same hole. You know, you might get sober, but you still have that same hole to fill. And I went back and I read the Bible again.
My goodness.
And
what year
this time
would
around,
this have been?
that
roughly?
would have been 1990, 1992, right around there. And it, this time it was the red words of Jesus in the New Testament that really hit me. And that was the beginning of my personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Wow.
You know, I'd never really gotten that before. And that continues to grow. But that is really what everybody's looking for, whether they know it or not.
What age would this kind of maybe first time realization of what a personal relationship with Jesus is? What age were you?
I was in my 40s.
Yeah, in your 40s.
Yeah.
So you kind of did a full circle thing. Started in church, went around the world looking, searching, and came back to that truth in the 90s.
Yeah. And, you know, that had a personal relationship with it. But that's not the end of the story. I'm a human being, you know, and I've gone through cycles and, you know, of ups and downs, peaks and valleys in my spiritual life, you know, that sometimes, you know, that God is silent, you know, and then I wonder, but I've always, I talk to God, you know.
It's called prayer.
Yeah, and a lot of it's called listening.
There you go.
You know, so through that, my relationship with him deepens, and it's I am where I am today.
We do these kind of conversations a lot, Dennis. There's this interesting kind of thought that you can apply to some of these, seasons in your life, as it were, is how do you even know you have faith unless it's called upon? If you never go through a desert season or this kind of midbar, a silent season, and what's really interesting about these kind of silent or what we would call a desert experience or something like that, is the Hebrew word for desert is midbar. And if you would ask somebody that understands the Hebrew language, they would say midbar is actually a positive thing. We think of silent seasons in our life as these kind of God's distance from us and he's left us alone and all that. And the Jewish connotation of midbar is very good because the desert, the wilderness is where you experience God. And it's a positive thing in the Jewish kind of language. And we sometimes get that all wrong, that if it's quiet or it's a lonely season, or if it's kind of a desert season where we're distant, we're further from God. And maybe it's the opposite of that. Maybe that's when we're actually closer to God, that he's nearer to us.
Faith and trust is strong.
Even at our lowest point, you're saying.
Yeah.
Jesus on the cross that's crying out to God because God was silent even in death. And it's a stress test, I guess, in a way too, isn't it? When you were talking about faith, you don't know. How do you know you have faith until it's
called upon?
That stress point. And, we have our knee-jerk reactions. Then that gets back to the principles that we were talking about, too, with Ronald Reagan as well. About you have something solid there that you can go to in those times of trouble. I wrote a song about those seasons in life.
Really?
That it's called God Gets Lonely Too.
My goodness.
That how he wants to have a relationship with us as much
as we need a relationship,
as we need a relationship with him.
Yeah.
Right.
You're very familiar to our viewing audience. You're very familiar to Laurie and myself because we've seen you on the big screen, the small screen. Behind you, there's a poster of you that I actually thought for a moment that was actually Ronald Reagan and that you were turning into Ronald Reagan. I realized, no, okay, that's actually you back there. But how did this experience of playing him come about? You're taking one of these people out of history that you realize the largest news event in our lifetime was basically the end of the Cold War. I mean, that's literally one of the biggest events in our lifetime. And this guy was, as it were, hell-bent on
the
getting
Pope
that
and Lech
done.
Walesa basically accomplished that.
Maggie Thatcher was kind of thrown.
Yeah, she was in there too.
Yeah.
And Reagan had been fighting communism all his life, really, from the time that he was president of the Screen Actors Guild, by the way, and he was fighting communists there because they were trying to take over the unions. People thought it was an old wives' tale that, but then when the Soviet Union fell, they found the files and, they were trying to take over the unions. And, boy, did we need him. It took a Cold Warrior like him to really know what the real world was like and lead us there. And it would be a much different world if it weren't for Ronald Reagan.
I'm interested in knowing how you approach this craft that you're doing, and taking on Ronald Reagan is a pretty tall order.
Yeah.
I understand your mama kind of had some effect on you.
A little bit, yeah. She's got to do this because I didn't think I looked like him or definitely didn't sound like him, and he's one of the most recognizable, like Muhammad Ali, recognizable in the world. And so, really a fear went up my spine about it. And that's usually a sign that I should say yes, because it gets me out of my comfort zone about it. It's but it's about the way I work is it's about from the outside in a little bit, but also finding out the humanity, getting down to what makes somebody tick, and something that I can relate to a person with. We both have sunny dispositions. I know that we're both actors, and it's about. There was a part of Reagan that was very, very private, almost impenetrable. That I found everyone who had known him had said, and really, I wanted to get down to what that was, and I think that was his relationship with God, actually.
Wow.
I really do. There was a very private place in there that was hard for anybody else to enter.
Yeah.
A very private man.
Feels like whenever...
And this is the great communicator.
Yeah, it feels like whenever he would speak and embrace faith and faith issues. Again, this 1983 was, quote, the year of the Bible, and so many of the Christian leaders, my dad and others, and Bill Bright and all the ones that were kind of there at that time, were so, they were literally enamored by the way that he could command the attention of the world. And figuring out how to do that on screen had to be the fear moment coming up your back to walk in and actually portray that.
I mean, he had to get there himself. One of the things I kind of felt when I play a real person, I feel like I have an obligation to play them from their point of view. And that means finding out, about their strengths, or, that can be obvious to all of us that we admire and stuff. And sometimes to find out, get to maybe some of those insecurities that we all feel too, because we're all human beings and we all feel the same things going through life. And one of the things was with Reagan, I don't think as an actor he ever got to that place that he aspired to be as an actor. And whether it was that, he was relegated to B movies by Jack Warner, and John Wayne already had his spot, or whatever it was, and he was married to Jane Wyman I think at this time, and she was winning an Academy Award while his career was going down. And what do you feel like inside with that?
Yeah.
It's those little things that actually kind of shape us in a way. And I think God's purpose for him was becoming president. And it was because really with kind of his career going downhill that he became vice president and then president of the Screen Actors Guild, which was really his entry into politics.
My goodness.
And fighting communism back in the 50s and 60s as in the guild there.
That's actually an amazing point that you bring up, that so often we fight the thing that we're trying to prop up or that we're trying to do. What if he would have kept fighting and pushing and elbowing back into roles? You see, God was making a left-hand turn for him.
That's what we do, isn't it? I get this impression that keeps coming back to me that, you got to be careful what you ask God for, because he just might give it to you.
Yeah.
And he'll give it to you in a way that you didn't expect. And you go, wait a minute, that's not what I meant, and we're tested in that way. And it's about finding purpose in life. What is God's purpose for us? And that's, I think he got led in a roundabout way to that. And acting helped out in the end because, as president, he was the greatest actor we ever had.
So how do you think the assassination attempt on his life changed him?
very interesting. We just had one,
Yeah.
a couple, another one, first one since Reagan. In fact, I think he said that my life is no longer my own.
Yeah.
After surviving that,
Yeah.
it's going to be a very humbling
Yeah.
event to happen to you. Your
life-changing.
mortality passes in front of your eyes, and we're mortal. God reminds.
What we're here for.
Yeah, and Reagan as well. He was waving, a bullet bounced off. It went in right here. They were going to go back to the White House because they thought he was okay, and blood came out of his mouth about halfway there, and they went to I think it was Walter Reed, and the bullet was about that far from his heart. So again, it was about a quarter of an inch from being gone.
What do you want us to experience
Listen,
coming out of the theater?
I think for people who were born before 1990, remember what this country could be.
Wow. Wow.
When we're all together, when we're united, and also remember, even though we were like not divided sometimes, how well we all work together in a sense. And what this country was and what it still can be.
Yeah.
And those after 1990, you get a little education of what it could be.
Yeah.
Still.
A lot of us, a lot of the viewers older than us are saying amen, and the younger ones are going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because they haven't seen politics done at a level where we can really embrace
you
somebody
can't blame
as a
them.
president.
Back then we had liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats. And there really wasn't all that much difference between the two.
Yeah.
And that has become so polarized. And, in a way, I think COVID has been kind of the beginning of a spiritual awakening again in this country.
Beautiful.
It's usually spiritual awakenings, usually they're a struggle.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done, and we've done it together. And we have to learn how to get back to that.
That little flicker of hope again.
Yeah, we're all Americans.
Right.
Yeah, it felt like we had a touch of it at 9/11. That all of a sudden we were Americans again. It feels like COVID kind of brought the world together. The largest streaming event in YouTube's history was Andrea Bocelli walking out in front of the Duomo in Milan singing Amazing Grace. He walked out and sang that song, and it felt like we could attain to something bigger. And it feels like Reagan represented that last era of that time.
Right. Well, every generation has their own test of that too, don't they? And I think COVID was a way for one thing, everybody's life stopped.
Yeah.
And realized
Crazy.
how fragile, all this jobs and this and that are. And it brought us back into homes, doing a routine that we hadn't maybe done in 20 years. The kids are home, families are together. And it really brought some introspection to people about looking into their own spirit. And what do you fill that with? And I think you have to talk to God at some point.
Yeah. Something we haven't talked about is Tim and Nancy. Their little love affair through all the years was so inspiring.
That's really central to this film.
Yeah.
In fact, in a way, you could say this is the love story, this film. There wouldn't have been a President Reagan without Nancy. And I'm not saying that she was the puppet master or anything like that. It was just the strength of their relationship. They had God in their relationship as well. And how behind him she was. And they found strength in each other. And he wrote her love letters every day, a little love note. Even would after in the hospital after the assassination attempt, and Penelope Ann Miller, she plays Nancy, and I don't know, she channeled her. I don't know how she was doing this, but it was like sometimes even annoyingly so a little bit. I mean, it's so great.
Too good.
It was fantastic. I mean, I would look at her. I would have had been able to do Reagan without somebody really fantastic in that part. She was so good.
When he made The Passion of the Christ, he was at the peak of his career.
Yeah.
Now, Mel had some problems after that became very public that were due to his drinking, which he gave up and told me he's not drunk for many years now. And so he, it was some hard times following The Passion. Mm-hmm. But he feels he came under real spiritual attack after he made that movie. I mean, here is really, at that moment in time, maybe the top star in Hollywood, who had coming off the success of Braveheart that won multiple Academy Awards. He starred in it. He directed it. Phenomenal film. And it even alluded or pointed to The Passion a little bit. There, I talked to Randall Wallace, who wrote the script for Braveheart. And he said that in the torture scene and the death scene of William Wallace, it was pointing to Christ. And so I think that this was all realized in this film. And it was interesting because Mel wanted to have it all in Aramaic. Remember? None of it was in English. And some people thought that was the worst idea. I thought it was a brilliant idea for this reason. Number one, Mel knows what he's doing. Let the artist do his art. And I think it was confirmed to be a good idea because you felt almost as though you were in a time machine taken back in time and actually were watching it happen. And it was brilliant, a brilliant direction, great performance by Jim Caviezel, stunning, and very accurate depiction of the crucifixion.
From Mad Max to Lethal Weapon to Braveheart, for decades, Mel Gibson has captivated audiences worldwide as both an actor and director, delivering compelling stories with unforgettable characters. His work has earned him awards for Best Actor, Best Picture, and Best Director. However, more impressive than any trophy is the indelible mark his films have left on countless viewers. Inarguably, his best example is The Passion of the Christ. For him, it was and is the ultimate superhero film.
Let's welcome Mel Gibson to the Harvest Crusade.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg, for asking me to come along
Thank you,
here.
Mel.
Honored to be here, and honored to be here.
They love you, Mel.
Well, I love you folks. About 12 years ago when I was when I made this film, I was literally getting the tar kicked out of me. Mm-hmm. And it was you people out there, evangelicals, who stood up and supported me. And I thanked you at the time, but I thank you again, okay? So that was great of you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. We love it. It's funny, I was talking with Mel backstage. I said, Mel, what was the first film that you were in? And I chose some film, and he said, no, I was in something called Mad Max. I said, yeah, I think I've heard of that somewhere. Yeah, I mean, Mel has been in so many films, but this film in particular, The Passion of the Christ, as I said, it's sort of like going back in time. I felt like I went into a time machine and almost was seeing it. And, there's some moments that are very graphic, but as you've said in interviews, maybe your film is realistic as it isn't as graphic as it actually was, the scourging, the whipping, the crucifixion itself. But why did you make this film?
Well, I think there's a tendency for all of us to take that event and the extent of the sacrifice, take it for granted.
Yeah.
And filmically, particularly, cinematically, I think it's been sanitized a fair bit.
Right.
So that it becomes, ineffective, ineffectual, not emotional.
Yeah.
And I wanted to illustrate the extent of the sacrifice Christ made. So I felt that to do a film like that, and my own experience contemplating over the years on the Passion, my imagination soared, and there are readings on the matter that kind of brought home the dreadful reality of how bad it was. And I just wanted to put that on film to give people maybe a new look and to sort of bring another theological perspective to it that perhaps they hadn't thought of before.
Now, Mel, there's a rumor, the word on the street is that you're going to do a follow-up to The Passion, and it's going to be written by Randall Wallace, who, how many of you have seen the film Braveheart? Have you seen Braveheart? Okay, yeah. Well, Mel directed that film. He starred in the film as William Wallace, and Randall Wallace wrote that film. And so you and Randall are talking about writing a sequel to The Passion. So is that going to really happen?
We're talking about that. Of course, that's a huge undertaking.
Yes.
And, it's not The Passion, too. I mean, it's called The Resurrection.
That's right.
And it's...
That's right.
Of course, that's a very big subject.
Yes.
And it needs to be looked at because we don't want to just do a simple rendering of it. I mean, we can all read what happened, but in order to really experience and explore probably deeper meanings of what it's about, it's going to take some doing. And Randall Wallace is up to the task. He's also, as well as a brilliant writer, he's a great director. He directed We Were Soldiers and Heaven is for Real and stuff. So he's a good writer and director.
Yeah.
So Desmond Doss was, he received the Medal of Honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor for courage under fire. And he was singular in that most guys who get the Medal of Honor, they do something in a split second. And it's a decision that, and they do something courageous, heroic. Desmond did what he did over and over and over again in different places in the Pacific. But his greatest achievement was in Okinawa, where he saved a lot of men. And the other interesting thing about Desmond is that he was a conscientious objector, and he went into battle without a weapon.
Yeah. As a medic.
As a medic. And what he did was supernatural. And he only did it through faith.
Yes.
That's all. He was armed only with his faith.
Yeah.
And this man existed. He was a man of faith and conviction. Never fired a bullet. Got the Medal of Honor for extraordinary feats that he could only achieve through the power of God.
Yeah, that's right. And you made a film about him. And I would say that Hacksaw Ridge is the best depiction of a Christian in a mainstream film that I've seen since Chariots of Fire. Because he's a hero, and he was a hero. You show him standing up for his faith. You show him reading his Bible, praying, taking a lot of abuse from his fellow soldiers who called him a coward. But hey, when it was all said and done, he was far from a coward. How many men did he rescue up from that place where that Hacksaw Ridge was? It was more than 100, wasn't it?
Well, the Army claimed it was 100, and he claimed it was less. So they rounded it off to 75.
Wow.
But he did that in 8 hours.
All by himself.
By himself.
Unbelievable. Motivated by his faith.
My father was a very, very abusive man. And I want to say this because it just puts it in perspective. One of my earliest memories is me being around 5 years old and walking out to hear my parents arguing and watching my father ball his fist up and hit my mother in the face as hard as he could. And she's laying there, she's knocked out, and he's like, "Look what you made me do." Now, you have to understand, it was so traumatic because here I am, a young man, trying to figure out what being a man is. That was my main question. All during my adolescent years, was like, what is being a man? And when I saw that, it was basically a lesson. It was like, it's his world. His world. It's might makes right. It's intimidation. It's aggressiveness. And it's fear. And you have to understand, getting beat up by those drug dealers and going out there, I was afraid to go out. And when I came home, I was even more afraid of offending my father. And, he was an alcoholic, and that was the big problem that we had in our house. And back then, it was wild, because at that time, they didn't even have a phrase for alcoholism, You weren't really a drunk or anything unless you were homeless or whatever, but if you were functioning and had a job, it wasn't considered a problem. But we had a problem. I mean, I woke up, I'll be honest, what's so crazy is that I wet the bed till I was 14 years old, simply because of the uncertainty and the stress. And I didn't know what, I would wake up to screaming, fighting, glass breaking, police coming to the house. It was just pandemonium. Yeah. And so because of that, I had this fear, and my whole thing was to beat this fear that I had, because it was something that I could hardly ever function. So I decided that I was going to get strong. I was going to work out. I was going to be this Ultraman and work my way into being this man above men, because one day I may have to kill my father. That was a realization that I had, because I knew one day, because it was just his reign of terror it was all encompassing. So that developed in me this desire to make it, this desire I call revenge. Now you have to understand something about revenge. For me, getting beat up by these drug dealers was like, okay, I'll show you. Watch when I get big enough, when I get strong enough, when I become the man, I'm going to put you in your place. Anyone that ever doubted me was one on my list. I took everything personal, okay? And my father was on my list. The people who doubted me, anybody who I felt was an obstacle in my life was on my list. But this is the thing that I discovered. You can have revenge or success, but you can't have both. And let me describe what I mean by that, because the essence of revenge is unforgiveness. Because I had a list. Yeah. These are the lists of people that I do not forgive. In fact, I'm gonna go to each one of them and settle my score. But the problem with that, and the problem is that you go back into a spider web. You go back into the mud. You go back into the dirt, and it keeps you there. Whereas success involves forgiveness. Success involves cutting off the old, moving into a whole nother way. You understand, a revenge movie is one of the greatest movies that guys love. You know what I mean? It's like Payback and Taken, and one thing we always love is like, I'll be back. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I'm gonna be back. I'm gonna get you. Anybody who ever wronged you, that's a movie. I'm trying to tell you, it's better than sex. It's like a fantasy that guys just go, whoa, I wish I could just get everybody back in this world. That mentality almost killed me. It took me out. I mean, I have to give it up to my lovely, lovely wife, Rebecca. She's in this front row. We have been married as of end of July, end of this month, we will have been married 34 years. And first of all, this woman put up with so much because remember, once you have that revenge thing on, it doesn't turn off. It's not just for the big things like my dad and the whole thing. It's for the little stuff. It's for somebody cut you off in traffic. It's for the family member that calls you a name. It's for, your wife said something you didn't like. So we had a term in the house, they call it petty cruise. You know what I mean? It's like, she would be like, it's petty cruise, here he is, because I was like, I'm gonna get everybody back, But, going back, I just remember when my mother was sitting there with her eyes hurt, and I remember getting her like this frozen peas, and we pull it out, she put it on her eye, and I remember dancing in front of her. And I remember trying to make her laugh. And I remember all these times that she would be laughing while she's nursing her injuries. And this is where I got my love for entertainment, for those who don't know. And the love for making people laugh, the love for doing this stuff. And so I knew that there was a better way, even in the midst of all of this pain and all of this heartache, but I didn't know how to get to it. You know, another thing too is that I grew up in the church, but the church that I went to was very, very restrictive. I mean, this is the thing. It was more about what we couldn't do than what we could do. I was not allowed to go to the movies, not allowed to dance, not allowed to listen to secular music, not allowed to play sports. Everything I do with my life right now, I was not allowed to do.
Yeah.
So I was like, what can I do? She was like, you can sit down, you can shut up. That's what you can do. I was like, okay. But that was also super frustrating because I was like, well, if you go to church and you got to cut off everything, then what is the point, you know? Yeah. And you got to understand, I knew the phrase born again. I knew what the phrase was, but I never acted on it. It was something that you said. It was something that but you didn't really activate it in your life. So I walked around super, super angry. And let me tell you, the thing about this anger is that you get a lot done. You work overtime to show that you're gonna pay people back. Like, you work double, you work triple. You will do, it's funny because I like to say underachievement and overachievement comes from the same place. You know, if you're an underachiever, you live under a bridge. But an overachiever lives under a bridge that he owns. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you work so hard to hide from everybody. You know what I mean? And I had developed this, my wife would tell me, she's like, you are just, what is the deal? You are so angry. I mean, we would go places and somebody would slight me and I would throw the guy over Rebecca's head. And she was like, you can't do this. Promise me, because you're gonna either get shot by the police, you're gonna get, or in jail, and we won't have you. Because I had this temper that was hair trigger because it was always about showing that I was the man, showing people that I could do this. And let me tell you, it goes back to the story about my father. And we call this the Christmas from hell. Okay. And it was around 2000. Now again, when I say, you know, you get a lot done, I had worked my way, played in the NFL for 7 years, for different teams, then went to Hollywood and worked my way into success there, started doing movies, started doing TV shows. And so we decided to go home for the holiday and celebrate some of these things. And it was around 2000, so it was early in my career. And my wife and I, we were going out to dinner, and we were in Flint, but we were driving out to dinner. And I get a call, a frantic call from my aunt. And she's like, Terry, this house is in pandemonium. You won't believe this. Your father, he hit your mother. And I said, but now you gotta understand, man. I mean, it's starting to come back to me even while I'm talking because my kids were there. My kids never grew up around that. And I was like, wait a minute, man, what just happened? She said, Terry, he hit her so hard, her front tooth is knocked loose. Now I'm a grown man. Now I'm 245 pounds. I'm not 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And my whole MO is revenge. Mm-hmm. And I said, now he messed up. Now this is my time. Mm-hmm. I remember driving back to Flint. I told Rebecca, I said, get everybody out of the house and just leave us. And let me tell you, I beat that man within an inch of his life. And it was horrible. There was no satisfaction. I was waiting. I was waiting for it to come back. Like, there's going to be, now it's justice. But it wasn't there. I remember just feeling like this is not how it's supposed to be. Here my father is on the ground bleeding. I'm sitting on his bed and I'm watching him. And I'm like, this is a man I want to honor. And I'm hitting him. And it wasn't right. And when you're talking about this revenge thing, there's always this promise of a payoff. There's a promise of, wow, you're going to finally get it back and everything, and the score is going to be settled. But it was never settled. And I remember leaving that, I left Flint emptier and colder than I'd ever been. And we went years after that. And it was affecting everything around me. You have to understand, with me, also part of being this image and having this male thing where you got to hold it up, you also were putting up a front.
Yeah.
It was the Terry Crews that everybody loved, and then there was the Terry Crews who was actually Terry Crews. My wife knew that. And our relationship, we were 20 years in. Again, we're celebrating 34 years, but at year 20, right after our 20th anniversary, our marriage was over. Because of this, because of the things that I did, the things that I said, the things I tried to hide, the stuff I hid behind, the attitudes, the anger, the resentment that I had. Because that's the thing, is if you always put people on a list, you're full of resentment. Yeah. So here I was, full of resentment, the whole thing, and I'd start arguments with her just to have them. And she was like, Terry, I'm done. And my wife has always been honest with me. And she was like, that's it, I'm out. And one thing that I realized is that in everyone's life, you're either a fool, a victim, or a king. And when you're a fool, you mess up your life. You do all this stuff, foolish stuff, you mess it all up, and then you switch to the victim phase because you got a reason why you messed it all up. And wait, the table is always full of excuses. Excuses why. First of all, my father was abusive. I came up and fled. It was the gang members. It was the drugs. It was this. We didn't have no money. I was poor. And the table was always full of excuses. And they're valid for a minute. Yeah. But then the king is responsible for whatever's in his world. And that's a shift. Yeah. That is the shift where, wait a minute, yeah, all that is true, but it's still you. It's still you. And listen, I remember asking out loud, like, why doesn't my wife believe me? And once she left, the question became, why was I lying? Two different ways to see that.
Yeah.
Why was I lying in the first place? Yeah. And I realized I needed to press the reset button for real on my whole life. And this is where being born again meant something. It wasn't a phrase. It wasn't just something people said. You had to be a new person. Yeah. And listen, it hit me so hard. It's funny because I was looking at all these affirmations and things that you said before the service. And it was something I would say, but I never acted on. I would be the new guy in here and then the old guy outside. Yeah. But it's like what Jesus said about you can't put new wine in old wineskins. Yeah. You have to be new. And this realization made me, it took me to my knees, Pastor. Took me to my knees. I had to raise my entire life. This was in 2010. And I tore it all down. And what was so crazy is that, you know, Hollywood doesn't care if you lose your family. They just don't. They're like, oh, great, you got 2 more movies for you and another show. And I was like, I don't care. And it's funny because I got really, really good advice from a great, great pastor. And he said, hey man, I can't promise you're gonna get your wife and kids back, but you need to get better for you. And I thought, what does that mean? Like, you know, you have to understand, I was doing everything for the Scooby Snap. You know, like, you did good work for this and you did that for this, but to be good for the sake of being good, well, listen, that new person does good for being good. When you are born again, when you realize you are new, and it's wild because once it came to me and I realized I can reset. I don't have to behave the way I behaved. I don't have to go the places I used to go. I don't have to do what I did. I can be responsible as a king now, knowing that God is my father, knowing that I am a child of God who can press the reset button on my life.
So good.
And I called out. I called out to God. I don't know what to do. It's funny because, you know, in the 12 steps, the first thing you have to do is admit your powerlessness. You have to admit you don't have control anymore. And then you also have to admit that you have to know the things you can control and the things you can't. And all that revenge, all that get back, all that stuff was an attempt to control things I could never control, ever. And you know, through years and years, and me and my wife went through tears, we went through pain, we went through counseling, we went through prayer, we went through everything, and we were able to rebuild our marriage stronger than ever. And I'm thanking God every day that our marriage was rebuilt. And one thing that I knew I had to do, because I had to really address this revenge thing. I had to really address this get back thing. And I said, okay, how do we address it? God, tell me what to do. How do we do this? Forgive. The word forgive. Listen, you can say it, but doing it, whoa. Remember, I had the list. Pulled the list out. And it was like, start marking people off the list, not as revenge, but as forgiveness. Man.
Wow.
And I decided that my father was first on that list. Wow. And I said, I gotta forgive him. And I said, how can I even open this up? How can I even begin to start this conversation? Because it's too ugly, it's too dirty, it's nasty. And I said, okay, what I'm gonna do is think of one thing he did for me to thank him for. One thing. And I said, and there wasn't many on the list. I was trying to think. My head was spinning, right? I'm going, man, this guy made my life a living hell. What can I think of? And I went, I said, I'm going to thank him for having me. That's it. That's it. And I called him up. I will never forget this day. I called him up. And let me tell you, it's hard to even fit your mouth around the words because the feelings aren't there. But I said, remember, you know, being born again is not something you say, it's something you do. And so I said, do this. And so I said, man, Big Terry, because that's what we called him. You know, I'm Little Terry, he was Big Terry. I said, Big Terry, thank you so much for having me. Because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't exist. And he cried, and he apologized, and he said, I'm sorry for putting you through what I put you through. And I eventually flew to Flint, And I gave him the biggest hug that we ever had in my life. Now, I'm not gonna say our relationship is that good, because it's still not. But the big thing was, what I thought was going to work was the beat down. But what really worked was the forgiveness and the hug.
Wow.
And now, no matter what decision he makes, because that's not what I can control.
Yeah.
But what I can control is the fact that I am free. I am free. And I know true success, it doesn't involve that revenge stuff. True success is in freedom and walking away and getting all that stuff out of there and moving on to your future.